Alice was very tired of sitting beside her sister on the bank, with nothing to do but glance now and then at one small glowing rectangle, when she noticed with some surprise that the rectangle appeared to be glancing back. She had only meant to look for a moment. This is, of course, what everyone means to do. A single bright post caught her eye. She could never afterward recall what it said, only that it had seemed at the time extremely important, and down she went after it, quite without deciding to, in the manner of someone stepping onto an escalator they hadn't noticed was moving. Down, down, down. It was, Alice thought, rather a long way to fall, and she had ample time to notice that every ledge she passed was stocked with another small glowing rectangle, each one lighting up obligingly just before she reached it, as though it had been expecting her personally for some time. "How considerate," she said out loud to no one, and took the next one anyway. By the time she landed, with the soft, unceremonious thud of someone who has been reading while walking, the whole tunnel around her had narrowed to a single color, and she had not noticed the narrowing happen at all, which she found, on reflection, to be the most alarming part. She could no longer quite remember whether she had chosen the color or merely kept accepting the next thing that looked like it. She had not gone far before she came upon a great many creatures running in a large, damp circle, with no visible start, no visible finish, and as far as Alice could tell, no visible reason. Underfoot lay a great many soggy leaflets, each proclaiming, in a different typeface, the same urgent warning. The leaflets had become important, Alice realized, not because anyone had read them, but because the crowd was running too fast to stop and check if they were true. And the faster everyone ran, the more warnings seemed to multiply underfoot. At last, quite out of breath, the whole party stopped, and the dodo, who had appointed itself referee, judge, and sole spectator, announced that everybody had won, and all must have prizes. There was enthusiastic applause. Nobody asked what exactly had been proven. "But who decided the race was worth running in the first place?" she asked. The dodo considered this with the gravity of a bird who has never once been asked a follow-up question, and said, "Everybody." "That's rather the point, you see. Everybody decided by running. But you just said the race had no course." "Precisely," said the dodo, looking extremely pleased with itself, and awarded her a prize for participating in the conversation. She next met a caterpillar seated upon a mushroom, smoking something that produced smoke in the shape of extremely confident-looking words. "Who are you?" said the caterpillar. Alice did her best to answer. The caterpillar, without so much as a pause for consideration, replied at once, fluently, calmly, and to a question she was fairly sure she hadn't asked. "That's not actually what I—" "An excellent question," said the caterpillar, and answered it again, slightly differently, with the same total confidence, as though confidence were a substitute for having listened. Only later, on quite a different afternoon, did Alice try to recall a single thing it had actually said. There was nothing there to recall. The smoke had been very convincing while it lasted. That, it turned out, was the whole of its job. At the tea party, it was always 6 o'clock on principle. Nobody could say why. Nobody had checked in some time. Every time a teacup was set down, a small folded note appeared beside it, bearing a new and urgent task, though nobody at the table could say who had written it, when, or on whose authority. "This one says, 'Circle back,'" said the March Hare, squinting at his note. "Circle back to what?" asked Alice. "I haven't the faintest idea. I only just circled back from the last one." The Hatter, meanwhile, was drafting a reply to a note about a note, which would, in turn, generate 2 further notes, neither of which anyone present had asked for, and both of which were now, apparently, overdue. By the end of the hour, the notes had become entirely self-sustaining, more certain that work existed than anyone at the table was. It was a perfectly optimized machine for turning urgency into exhaustion. "We haven't finished," said the March Hare, gesturing at the table, which had somehow acquired more teacups than there were chairs or people or reasons. "Finished what?" said Alice. "I don't recall it starting," said the Hare, pouring a fresh cup with the weary satisfaction of a man completing a task he had never assigned himself. The croquet ground was announced with considerably more shouting than croquet. "Off with their heads," cried the Queen, before anyone present had established who "they" were, or what they had allegedly done, or whether there had in fact been a game at all. Alice noticed, with the calm horror of someone doing arithmetic at a funeral, that the card soldiers carrying out the sentence did not appear to agree on the sentence. One was quite sure it involved the flamingo. Another was under the impression it had already happened, somewhere else, on Tuesday. A third simply stood very still and hoped not to be noticed, which Alice thought was, on balance, the most sensible strategy available to anyone that afternoon. What unsettles me, Alice said, mostly to herself, isn't that Her Majesty is often wrong. It's that nobody seems to be applying the same rule twice, and yet the sentence always arrives exactly on time. The rule, said a nearby card, not looking up, is written down somewhere. That isn't at all the same thing as being able to find it. She passed the White Rabbit no fewer than 4 times that afternoon, and each time he was later than the last, despite, as far as Alice could determine, never once arriving anywhere, finishing anything, or slowing down. His watch refreshed itself every few seconds, each time discovering with fresh alarm that he was still behind. "I'm late," he cried the first time. "I'm late," he cried. The second time in precisely the same tone, at precisely the same spot, as though the hedge had reset along with the watch. By the 4th pass, Alice simply stepped out of the way in advance, the way one learns to step out of the way of weather. He never seems to get anywhere, she thought, watching him vanish round the hedge for the 4th time. Only more, and more urgently, late, as though lateness itself were the entire occupation and arrival merely an old rumour nobody had confirmed. "Would you tell me, please, which way I ought to go from here?" Alice asked the Cheshire cat, who was arranged, as usual, in several places at once. "That depends a good deal on where you've already been," said the cat, in the tone of someone who knew the answer perfectly well and intended to enjoy watching her arrive at it herself. "I don't see how you'd know where I've been." "I don't need to ask," said the cat. "I've been paying attention." "You have not." It began, unhurried, to disappear, starting, as was its custom, with the tail, then the paws, then the stripes, until only the grin remained, hanging politely in the air like a held door. Alice studied the grin for a long moment. "You know," she said slowly, "that started to look rather like my own smile." "Has it?" said the grin, entirely unsurprised, and vanished last of all, taking with it something small from her face that she would never quite know how to ask back for. Alice woke on the riverbank with the particular breathlessness of someone who has been running in a dream without noticing, and for a moment could not say where the dream had ended, and the small glowing rectangle beside her, patient, lit, entirely undisturbed by her absence, had begun. She picked it up, out of habit more than curiosity, and found it exactly where she had left it, exactly as bright, exactly as ready. Curious, she thought, that I should fall asleep in a world of nonsense rules, only to wake and find one waiting for me. Perfectly awake, running by precisely the same ones, and rather better funded. The rectangle brightened. For an instant, Alice had the uneasy feeling that it knew exactly who she was, and the more uneasy feeling that it might be right.